Hi, my name is Sammy, and today we're going to be talking about paper from Red River Paper. Alright, so I have a Canon ProGraf Pro 300. It's what I use to print all of my photos. And up until now, I've been using Canon's Pro Platinum paper for all of my photo prints. And kind of my reasoning was like, it's a Canon printer, use Canon paper, keep the whole pipeline in Canon, and you'll probably get good results. So I went online and I bought every sample pack that I could find. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to go through, we're going to test out all of the paper, we're going to see which one of the Red River papers we like the best, and then at the end we're going to go back and compare it to my current favorite, the Pro Platinum paper, to see which paper I should use for my printing going forward. Let's take a look and see what came in the mail. So we've got this nice little welcome letter that basically just says, "Thank you for buying from Red River Paper. Please buy more paper from Red River." Then below that, we've got the Fine Art and Photography Discovery Kit. We've got the Photo Base Sample Kit. And we've got the Photo Expansion Sampler. So we're going to try out all of these papers and see which one we like the best. The first thing we need in order to get started is a photograph to print. This is a picture I took of some construction outside of Philly, and I really like it. I think it will make a good paper test because it has so many different tones and colors. It's also super sharp at f10, so it will show off the paper's ability to resolve detail. Since we get 2 tests per paper type, I also wanted to try out this photo that I took, which has a lot more greens and is also just a photo that I really like. So we're going to get started with the photo-based sample kit, but before anything else, we're going to go to Red River Paper's website and download the ICC profiles to make sure that everything's properly calibrated. This is kind of like a must-have if you're setting up new paper on your printer. I just got my first photo print. Of course it's going to look good because it's a good photo and it's decent paper, but I'm curious to check out the other papers and see how they compare. Alright, so first impressions, it just looks like a generic good default photo paper. Some of the things that I notice are that the greens, I mean there's really only a lot of green in this photo, but the greens look very kind of bright and saturated. It also has this kind of metallic-y, shimmery feel in some of the greens. If you've ever seen like a shiny baseball card or a shiny Pokemon card, it kind of looks like that a little bit. And then the other thing that I notice is that when you look at it from the side, it has this kind of watercolory feel to it that you don't quite get when you look at it from the top. Like from the top, at least to my eyes, it looks kind of more sharp and crisp and clean. And then from the side, it has this more watercolory look to it. But overall, to my eyes, it just looks like generic, good photo paper, kind of like a default paper that you could use for a lot of things. This is the construction photo, and to be honest, I'm not quite as happy with it. The blues look a little bit washed out to me and a little bit less punchy. And it also doesn't have that super sharp, super crispy feeling that I was going for when I took this photo. So I guess same paper, but not quite as happy with this one as I was of the other print. Here are the photos from the 68-pound UltraPro Gloss photo paper. From what I can tell, they look pretty similar to the metallic photo prints that we just made, except they don't have that kind of shimmery holographic feel to them when you view them from certain angles. I also kind of like the construction photo a little bit more on this paper. It's not a super significant difference, but to me, it looks just like a tiny bit cleaner and a tiny bit crisper. But again, you know, these are really subtle differences, and so it's hard for me to, you know, really pinpoint precisely. I would say overall these photo papers are very similar. other than the kind of metallic holographic finish on the other one. Alright, so now we've got the polar matte. I actually had to make the photos a little bit smaller for this because for matte paper, Canon printers actually ask for a little bit of a wider margin, so just keep that in mind if you're making prints on matte paper. Alright, so we have photos from the matte paper. These actually, to my eyes, look pretty good. Obviously, you know, it's matte paper, so it's going to look pretty different from the glossy paper. Matte paper, you know, tends to be a little bit less punchy and a little bit more muted. And these definitely do look a little bit less punchy than the glossy paper, but they're actually, to my eyes, they look pretty saturated and pretty nice, especially compared to some of the other matte papers that I've used. So if you're using matte paper because you really want that quiet and soft muted look, I mean, these aren't as quiet as some of the other matte papers that I've used. I mean, they're not glossy, but they're still kind of like, at least to me, they look pretty saturated and pretty contrasty. So I'm actually pretty happy with these. So now we got Pro Satin prints. These are somewhere between the matte print and like the glossy prints. I actually think that the matte print that we made before was kind of saturated enough and punchy enough for my liking. And so, I mean, these don't actually look kind of that much more colorful and that much more exciting than the matte print that they already made, but we do have a little bit more of like a glossy finish. So actually between these two, I kind of like the matte print a little bit more, even though they are kind of similar. But yeah, this is somewhere, you know, in between the matte print and the gloss print, which is what you would expect. I'm also noticing that the construction photo doesn't really look sharp and punchy and kind of edgy on really any of these photo papers, which is leading to believe that maybe I didn't edit it exactly the way that I wanted to. But I remember printing it on Pro Platinum paper, and I actually really liked the way that it looked on Canon's Platinum paper. So that's kind of why I was expecting it to look a little bit more punchy and a little bit more exciting, but we'll get to that later when we do the comparison at the end of the video. Here we've got the Pro Luster paper, and I actually really like this one. It's kind of bright and a little bit glossy, kind of like the semi-gloss, not like super glossy, but a little bit glossy, but it's also got this really thick kind of weighty feel to it. Like it feels like a really kind of professional kind of fine art print when you're holding it in your hands. It's the type of thing where if you're giving your photos to someone in a frame and you're never taking it out of that frame, then I think kind of the weightiness of the paper doesn't really make that much of a difference. But if you're giving your prints to someone as photo prints and you're just handing them a piece of paper with your photo on it, I think that giving them something that feels more substantial and, you know, that feels like a serious photo print can really go a long way in terms of making a good impression. This is also the first paper where I'm really happy with the way that the construction photo came out. Last up, we've got the Pro Luster Metallic, which is pretty similar to the Pro Luster, except it's got that kind of metallic holographic-y finish to it, which I personally don't really like, but if you want that kind of quality, then this is the paper for you. I also want to add that, you know, this effect is pretty subtle, so it's not going to look like a shiny Pokemon card, but it does kind of have a little bit of shimmer to it if you look at it from a certain angle. So now we're going to just gather all the prints together and compare them to see which one we like the best, and also to kind of talk about the differences between them. So here's the same construction photo printed on 6 different sheets of paper. The differences between them are super subtle. So if you're looking at any one photo individually, the special aspects of that particular paper won't quite pop out as much. But when you look at all of the different photos side by side, you can really see the differences in the paper much more emphasized. For me, the ones that stand out the most are the metallic print and the matte print. The metallic print, once again, has that really shimmery feel that I didn't really like, especially more so in the first metallic print. Not quite as much in the Luster metallic print, but definitely in the first one. And then the matte print, obviously, matte paper is kind of different and has a little bit of a different effect to it. So it's a little bit more kind of quiet and a little bit more muted. But on this paper in particular, the kind of matte paper effect is a little bit less matte papery than in other matte papers that I've used. Between the other three, the Luster, the Satin, and the Gloss, they're all pretty similar in the way that they render, but I like the look of the Satin just a little bit more than the others, but once again, like they're all pretty similar. Now we're just going to take a quick look at all of the photos from the side so that you can see what it looks like when you look at them from different angles. I also want to extra point out the metallic print from the side angle. I know I'm close up at an angle, so the focal plane is super tiny, but I hope you can see kind of what I'm talking about when I was talking about this metallic effect. Alright, and now here is the other set of photos arranged in the same order. I think of these, the Pro Satin is still my favorite, although I still kind of like the look of the Luster and the matte. I think if you are someone that likes matte paper and also likes your matte paper a little bit more kind of punchy and a little bit more saturated, I think this matte paper is a really good option. Last up for comparison, we have Canon's Pro Platinum paper. Now I printed these a little bit smaller just because I had some extra 4x6 paper lying around. But as you can see, I mean, these prints look great. Like, there's a reason why this has been my go-to paper for a really long time. Like, I know what these look like and they look really good. In comparison to the Red River paper, these are a little bit on the glossy side, but again, I just really like them. And they just kind of look really balanced and just do everything pretty well. Something that I also notice is that the blacks in this photo for some reason look a little bit richer and a little bit darker than the blacks in some of the Red River prints. You know, this is just my opinion. It's a super unscientific comparison, but this is the paper that I like the most. And after looking at a bunch of papers, it's still the paper that I like the most. The one thing that I will say though is the matte papers from Red River looked really good to my eyes, and they looked a lot better than I remember the matte papers looking that I used from Canon. So if you're somebody that really likes the matte paper look and that's kind of more your style, then definitely give some of those Red River papers a try. So we only got through one sample pack, but this was actually a lot of prints to look at and compare to each other. And so if you guys are interested in this, we're gonna do the other prints in another video. Now we're gonna wrap up with some conclusions from this comparison, and I'm just gonna kind of give you my final thoughts on all of these papers. I actually learned a lot from making this video. And the first thing that I learned is that fundamentally all of the photo papers render very similar as long as you calibrate them correctly. So like, honestly, when I first started running this comparison, I was hoping for like a silver bullet. Like I was hoping for something like, oh, like I'm just missing that I didn't print it on the right photo paper, and now if I print it on the super ultimate photo paper, you know, it's gonna look, everything is just gonna look amazing. Like it's just gonna make all of my photos look perfect. And that didn't happen. So basically, like, most of the papers rendered in a really similar way. For me, you know, it's just another reminder that like you should really focus on getting your images right the first time, and you should really focus on your composition and your editing and really getting it right in camera so that when you print it, you're actually printing something that's really worth printing. That being said, there are some real differences between all of these different papers, and if you pick the right one for the thing that you're trying to convey, it can give you that little bit of extra edge to make it just look a little bit punchier or a little bit cleaner, or kind of get it a little bit closer to the mood that you're trying to convey. So I started out this challenge liking the Canon Pro Platinum paper, and at the end of this challenge, end of this comparison, it's not a challenge, but at the end of this comparison, I wound up liking the Pro Platinum paper the most still. That being said, even though I don't usually use matte papers, I really like the matte paper from Red River. Even though it's a matte paper, it still didn't look super kind of dry and muted in a way that a lot of the other matte papers that I've used do, so I thought, that was really good. I also kind of liked the Luster and the Satin paper, but I thought that it wasn't quite as good as the Pro Platinum paper for a very similar type of paper. The only thing from Red River that I really didn't like is I really didn't like the metallic prints. I thought that kind of the shiny holography feel, like that's very subtle, just like looked more weird to me than like kind of interesting and exciting. So I guess if that look is for you, then by all means get metallic paper, but for me that just like wasn't something that I really liked at all. So final thoughts. So going forward, I'm still going to keep using the Pro Platinum paper. It's still my favorite and I really like the way that it looks. I thought the Satin and the Luster papers from Red River were still pretty good and still rendered pretty similar. So if you really want to get paper from Red River and you print using those papers, it'll probably be fine. So if I use matte prints, which I probably won't do, but if I make any matte prints, I would definitely use the Red River paper for my matte prints. And then I personally would not use the metallic paper at all. Like I just wouldn't touch it. As I mentioned before, we only actually covered the first sample pack in this video. So I was thinking about maybe covering the rest of the sample packs in another video, but I don't know if that's something that people are interested in. So if that is something you're interested in and it's something that you want me to make a video on, please let me know in the comments down below. And also, if there's anything that you want to see or that you want me to test, let me know also, and then I can help show you the things about the paper that you might be interested in. So thanks so much for watching. Again, appreciate any feedback a lot. That was a comparison of a million different photo papers.